Good afternoon. Welcome to our first episode of Season 3 of Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Belatti and I'm the House Majority Leader. Today is March 7th, 2022, and it's been an amazing last 2.5 years. Today is an auspicious day. We learned just recently that Red Hill will be shutting down permanently, according to the Pentagon. So much has happened since the beginning of this year, and even today was another great day because of the opening of the Capitol to the public. As COVID restrictions fall, there's much going on and there's much to talk about. Our first interview today is with Governor David Ige, and I was able to chat with him. So let's dive right into his conversation where he talks about lessons learned from the pandemic, his thoughts on the recent corruption, and the sustainability and work initiatives of his administration. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here at Talk Story with House Majority. I have a very special guest here today, our very first guest of our first episode of Season 3, Governor David Ige. Governor, thank you for joining us.
Wow, thank you for making the arrangements. I certainly enjoy every opportunity I can to talk with the public.
So we're here at the state capitol. We're both vaccinated, we're both boosted, and we can take off our mask. Sure. Thank you so much, Governor, for joining us. You know, this is Season 3 of Talk Story with House Majority. You were on our Season 1, so yes. Thank you again for joining us. We've been doing this for 3 years, and I personally am exhausted from the pandemic, and I just wanted to ask you, looking back on the last 2 to 3 years, what are your thoughts on where we are?
You know, this pandemic has definitely not been like anything we ever could have imagined. I still recall going to the National Governors Association meeting in 2020, early in January, February, and getting a briefing from Homeland Security. And the whole focus was about that this is serious, you know, it will have significant impact. But I don't think anybody thought that 2 years later we would still be fighting COVID. I mean, it's night and day. It's a very different environment than we are here today than it was at the very beginning. But, you know, all of us thought a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. Certainly, I don't think anybody thought it would be 2 years.
So going back to that first governor's meeting, I mean, Hawaii was one of the first states to actually act, from what I can recall, in yes. February and March. What were some of those talks like? What did you learn from the other governors?
I think it was a couple things that became clear. It was very clear with President Trump that we shouldn't count on federal action. Mm-hmm. He made it very clear that that they weren't going to be driving it from the federal government, even though some of his public health experts were talking about how serious the virus was going to be. So that really motivated us, as you know, testing, mm-hmm. being 2,500 miles away from anybody. When we had to send samples back to Atlanta, we knew that we wouldn't get results back for 5 to 7 to 10 or 14 days. Mm-hmm. And getting the lab certified, and you know, the state lab was one of the first state labs to get certified to be able to test for the coronavirus, and that was very, very important. As you know, mm-hmm. you know, we couldn't wait 3, 7, 10, 14 days in order for us to get a response back. We needed to be able to take action much, much quicker. So
I can recall those early days. We shut down.
Yes.
We could still come to the Capitol. We were still trying to figure out how we were going to legislate. You were governing. We had thousands of people out of work. We come back for numerous sessions, and we're just staring at each other, and the economy is at a standstill. I mean, what was it that gave you hope in that time, maybe in late 2020?
You know, I think it was a couple things that I could see happening. Clearly, I knew that when I ordered the 14-day quarantine for all incoming travelers, that the economy would screech to a halt. Mm-hmm. And certainly, you know, many in our community would be out of work. But, you know, Della, as you know, as we were working through those early days when we had no treatment, we were trying to ramp up testing because we were very limited in testing, and there was no vaccine. The focus really was on public health and thinking through what things would we need to be able to do. Like you said, right? Every organization had to reinvent everything that they did. So how do you have public hearings? How do we communicate with the public? A lot of our public servants had to do other things just because we had to respond to the pandemic. And so I think what gave me hope, Della, in the early days is that everybody was willing to listen, to do whatever they could do to help. And there was not a whole lot of bickering or infighting that you saw in other jurisdictions. I think everybody was committed to be part of the solution and to find whatever way they could be helpful. I spoke with hotels in the early days and talking through what it would look like. We didn't know that we would shut down travel for 6 months or 8 months. And just talking through that, I didn't know was difficult for them, but they were really focused on employees. And I mean, it was remarkable that virtually every employer kept their employees on, even though they were shut down. I think in Hawaii, we appreciate that access to health insurance is a right, not a privilege, right? And it was remarkable to see organization after organization thinking about how they could keep their employees safe, how they could keep them covered with health insurance. Obviously, many wanted to keep them working, but that just wasn't possible. And so, in Hawaii, we know that when there's an emergency, the public responds and the community responds. And I think that is what gave me hope that eventually we would get through this.
I would echo that because I think across the islands, we saw community, government, the private sector, the nonprofit sector really come together. So the game changer really was vaccines.
Absolutely.
And can you speak a little bit about that and what we know now about vaccines and where we're going to go from here?
Sure. I do think the game changer was vaccines and the fact that it became available. We knew that vaccines would become available in late 2020. As you know, we began the pre-travel testing, Safe Travels Hawaii, that we started to plan in the summer,
Yes.
right? We finally got to the point in October where we could roll it out and allowed Trans-Pacific travelers who got tested as part of the trusted testing partners to be able to travel to Hawaii, and that helped get more people back to work. Today we have 2 very good vaccines. The availability is very good. We had during this pandemic over 400 sites that people could get vaccinated, and we even worked with pharmacies to be able to make house visits. When was the last time the health industry actually made house visits? But for those who were shut in and had no access, we did make arrangements to offer the vaccine to anyone who wanted to be vaccinated. And, I'm proud that Hawaii is in the top 10 states across the country. When I checked the statistics this morning, we're at 76% fully vaccinated and 83% initiated. So it certainly protects us as a community.
And I think that's a really important message, that we vaccinate not just for ourselves, but also to protect the population as a whole. So you've made some recent announcements, and it looks like the COVID restrictions are going to drop, and we're going to continue to live with this new normal. What can we expect moving forward with the economy, with public health, with anything that's in Hawaii now that we're hopefully post-pandemic or endemic stage now?
Right. I think us as individuals, organizations, and businesses have really done a much better job of learning to live with the virus. I think as employers, we got to remember that when employees are symptomatic, that they need to stay home. And that should be the standard, but obviously a lot of us, and I'm guilty myself, tough it out when you're not feeling so good because, the focus is on getting the work. We know that we need to focus on health, especially in office settings and others, so that we can keep each other healthy. So we do know that we have greatly expanded testing capability, the availability of inexpensive rapid tests at home really allows us to take some control over that whole process. If we feel we've been exposed, we can get a result back in 15 minutes and know whether we're positive or not. We have much better therapeutics. There are a couple of monoclonal antibody treatments that we know, if administered early on in the infection, has tremendous results. And as you know, we are seeing now, Della, pills, antiviral medication that are as effective as some of the monoclonals that you can take orally. And as you know, President Biden announced in his State of the Union a brand new test and treat program, and they want to have pharmacies who are able to test if someone is positive to COVID. They want them to be able to take the antivirals right there and take them home so they can begin treatment right away.
So we've really advanced with science through this, either the vaccines or the treatments, and now we know that we can tackle this disease.
Right, absolutely. And Della, it's really about taking the lessons learned during this public health pandemic. I think it's everybody doing their small part. I mean, we never really thought about work cohorts and about trying to make sure that we at least am aware of the interactions between employees, so that should someone have an infectious disease, we can do contact tracing and isolate and really keep everybody safe. I think all of the organizations and businesses will carry some of that forward because we've learned that it makes a difference. And I do think that it helps us all learn to live with COVID. Even though the case counts will be with us, even though we know we have to be prepared for the next variant that surges in our community, I think we all know the actions that we can take to reduce the spread of the virus and keep each other healthy and safe.
I really like that because it's about all of us doing it together as a community. And I think that's one of the big takeaways I have from how we were able to work through this pandemic. So, given your years of experience, Governor, and I hate to change the subject because this is actually not a comfortable subject for me, but because of the recent corruption cases, you and I have both been in the legislature for a long time. How do you think we go about regaining the trust of our community in light of the very troubling corruption cases we're hearing about now?
It certainly was a shock to me, as I know it was to you, to hear about the recent situation with Senator English and Representative Cullen. It paints all elected officials in a bad light. I know that all of us really choose to pursue elective office to really serve the public. I do think that there are some things that we need to do, and I think we do it naturally every day as how we believe we serve the public. I know you do frequent town meetings and broadcasts and engagements like this. I think transparency is very important, being able to face the public and engage and respond to questions when asked. I think that's really important. I do think it is about redoubling our efforts to engage the community and in a person-to-person way. I'm hopeful that the COVID surge has passed us and we can get back to in-person town meetings instead of virtual meetings, because I do think it makes a difference. It does make a difference, Della, when you can be in a cafeteria with your community and face them directly and answer questions. I think that makes a big difference. And so I think we need to do more of that. I know you guys are looking at some of the campaign reforms, and I think that that might be helpful. Unfortunately, in elected politics, campaign money makes a difference. And, I wish that Citizens United didn't happen. I think that's really skewed the influence of money, because virtually, super PACs have virtually unlimited budgets, and we don't know who's making those contributions. So I think that that has really stressed the overall system. I know that we've tried to take action in the state of Hawaii to limit or at least provide more transparency for super PACs. I wish the Congress would act, because clearly I think that Supreme Court decision was wrong. But I think in light of all of those things, we need to do what we can. I think it's about increased transparency. I do think it's about trying to manage the elective campaign process the best that we can. And then it really is about facing the community and being available, accessible, and transparent.
I think we're going to have some really tough conversations over the next couple of months, and there will be some policy discussions. So I really appreciate your insight, Governor, especially because of the length of time that you've been in office, and also because I know that you are committed to transparency and ethical government. So my last question, Governor, for you, and thank you again for spending this much time with me, but what are the policy accomplishments you're most proud of over the last 7 years of your administration?
Della, as we said, I do think that part of why I have hope in this COVID battle is because we always come together as a community. I think the biggest impact that Hawaii has had, especially in the last few years, is our leadership when it comes to sustainability and fighting climate change. I was able to go to Scotland and to COP26, and I was proud to be governor of Hawaii because we can talk about not only the high impact actions that we believe we're willing to take. It really was about encouraging the entire world to recognize that each and every person and organization can make a difference if they choose to. And Hawaii being the first state in the country to commit to 100% renewable energy for electricity. I still remember going to the governor's conference in 2016 and many governors asking me, are you crazy? I mean, really, how do you guys think you'll do it? And today there's 12 other states that have followed Hawaii's lead. And I'm proud that in 2018, Della, we became the first state to commit to net negative, because we knew that after 4 years of working to be a net zero, we know that net zero is not good enough to save the planet. It really is about getting to net negative and protecting our natural resources, protecting our forests, reforesting those areas that may have been damaged due to other uses in the past, and really protecting our oceans. Our commitment to a sustainable Hawaii is the foundation for climate action. I know that it's not about Governor Ige taking those actions, right? It's about the state of Hawaii. It's about the legislature enacting laws that allows us to set the policy. It's about talking about the counties to join us. It's about being willing to say, we're taking this action, California, Oregon, Montana, are you guys gonna follow our lead? And then going to Stockholm and really asking the world, saying, look, we've taken this action and it hasn't penalized our economy. It hasn't been a burden for our community. You can take these and establish these aggressive goals, and you can achieve them without impacting your jobs or your economy or other actions.
I can remember when we were talking about the 2050 sustainability plan, and it was maybe like 2010, right?
Yes.
Or 2014. And so any thoughts on that piece of it? Because that is actually going to go far into the future beyond your administration, any thoughts on the 2050 plan and what's going to happen with those efforts?
I mean, I do think, and Della, we are implementing the 2050 plan. I mean, there's nothing in, the policies that we've enacted that is not consistent with the 2050 plan. The plan at its core is about every facet of our economy, of our community, being really focused on resiliency and self-reliance. The whole notion of food sustainability. We saw during this pandemic how vulnerable we can be because we still import so much food. But over the last several years, we've just seen a tremendous increase when we focus on the goals. I know that the Department of Agriculture had published a study that we actually got to 90%. We expanded local food production by 90%. My goal was 100%, doubling local food production. But, so we failed, but we started and changed the trajectory. So I can see a tremendous acceleration. From a layperson's perspective, I remember going to Costco 5 or 6 years ago, and there was no local vegetables on sale. And I was there over the weekend, and you can get lettuce, leafy green lettuce from White Poly Gardens. You can get eggplant. You can get cucumbers. You can get so many things locally, and it's really been because we, as policymakers in the legislature, set up ambitious goals, and we've really redirected a lot of energy that is consistent with the 2050 sustainability plan. It's about stop sending money out of state to create jobs elsewhere. It's really about trying to invest in ourselves and our community. So, I think, if I had to summarize the 2050 plan in a nutshell, that's what it's about. It's about being committed in everything that we do to be self-reliant. So it is about local food production. It's about, asking all of our businesses, what can you do to hire a local consultant instead of going to a mainland consultant? And how do we build those capacities in state instead of always looking for the lowest cost provider? What we need to do is look for the highest quality local provider and then help them be more successful, because that's what will make a difference as we start talking about 2050 sustainability.
So I'm listening to you, Governor, and I hear you channeling Governor John Burns and about the resiliency and what's the best thing about this place. It's the people of Hawaii. Absolutely. That's what I hear you saying.
Absolutely. And Della, it's your coming to Hawaii is probably different than mine, but there are so many similarities that it overwhelms the differences. My grandparents came to Hawaii with nothing, from Japan and Okinawa, and your grandparents came from someplace else. But it really is about being committed and seeing the hope that Hawaii represented, that their families would find a better future by coming here. And then after getting here, it's about understanding that education is the great equalizer. That, if you invest in education for your children, they will have better and more opportunities than you ever did. And it's about being committed to leaving a better Hawaii for the next generation than they receive, because they want to make a difference. It's that sense of community that shows up every time there's an emergency or disaster, the willingness to do whatever they can, willingness to, even with people who without much, but they're willing to give everything they have in order to help the community. And, I think that that's what makes Hawaii a very special place. That's what allows us to be successful during these crises. And I think that that's what makes me feel best about the 2050 plan. It really is about being committed to each other and being willing to invest in our community so that we can all end up with a better Hawaii for everyone.
So I feel like that's the last thing that needs to be said. And Governor, it was really inspirational to hear you, because I know you have had a very rocky and tough 8 years, but it seems like this is going to be a high note for you. So I really appreciate everything. And if you wanted to say any final words to the people of Hawaii, please.
No, I mean, I just really want to thank all the people of Hawaii. Yes, this last 2 years were really difficult for all of us. You know, being willing to sacrifice, you know, key life milestones. I cannot imagine the challenges of having to skip a graduation or a first birthday. I know so many who postponed their weddings because of the COVID pandemic. But I do believe that we all came through it together. And as long as we remember that we are better together than separate, I know that the future of Hawaii will be much better than any of us ever imagined.
Thank you so much, Governor.
Absolutely.